It's a pleasure, and I must say I'm really glad that Michael started out and reviewed Pat's work so that I didn't have to undertake this really monumental task, and I can focus instead on just some lessons in one minor area that I've learned and want to talk about. Do you want me to wear this?
They want you to wear it.
They want me to wear it. Okay.
Not me.
So, I've had two mentors, Pat and Ruth Marcus, both of whom I admired long before I ever met them, both of whom I have come over the years that I've known them to love, and both of whom my entire philosophical career I've been absolutely terrified of. And in both cases, for the same reason, which is, as we know about Pat, the intellectual power, and also in both cases the intellectual focus. So you mustn't think that, say, if you stay over with either of them, that you might have a casual conversation about buckwheat pancakes over breakfast. That's not on the pappy. Now, with Ruth at least, I once had some relief. When I was still a graduate student at Chicago Circle, she invited me and a couple of the young Circle faculty to a breakfast with Elizabeth Anscombe. And I wondered why we were invited, and I asked Ruth, and she said that she needed us for moral and intellectual support because she was terrified of Elizabeth. Now, I've never been invited to such an occasion with Pat, and I doubt that any of the rest of you have either. So there's been no relief from these being terrified. Well, I want to talk today along these lines about intellectual power I don't have, but about the kind of intellectual rigor. I want to talk about two lessons I've learned from Pat. And the first is that rigor matters, but the second is don't bring to a subject more rigor than it can bear. Now, my topic today is a place where I think rigor is badly needed, and I'm in trouble for trying to bring it there. Okay? And that's the movement that insists that randomized controlled trials are the gold standard in evidence for predicting medical and social policy effectiveness. So a lot of the ideas I have here, very simple ideas, are based on Pat's work on probabilistic causality. But I am in trouble for trying to bring some rigor to the discussion. And here are two people I'm in trouble with. One is Ian Chalmers, who is at he's one of the founders of the evidence-based policy group in Oxford, which is evidence-based medicine group in Oxford, which is one of the core places that really pushed off the evidence-based medicine movement. He's an influential and avid spokesman for the group, and about 3 years ago there was a conference at the LSE sponsored by the philosophy department, the philosophy center, and the Center for Biology and Society there. It was run by a sociologist of the biomedical sciences, and she published a volume of papers afterwards. And Ian Chalmers wrote to her. He wasn't in it, but he read the volume, and he wrote to her, and he said, "This is a marvelous volume, but I really must protest that you've got this paper by Cartwright in it." And, you know, Cartwright thinks that she can talk about these issues by writing down some equations. So, I'm in trouble with Chalmers for thinking that equations matter. You'll see the equation I wrote down. It's not all that complicated. It's a simple linear equation with 4 variables in it. Right? Now the other is Michael Rowlands. Michael Rowlands is the current head of Britain's National Institute for Clinical Excellence. NICE is the body that recommends what's best practice for British medical practice, including psychological therapies. And I was at a, even though Michael Rowlands himself has been less strict, argued about not being so strict, about randomized controlled trials being the gold standard for evaluating medical and psychological interventions. Still, I was at invited to a conference by talking therapists. You can imagine talking therapists are a little worried about the idea that you need randomized controlled trials to attest that therapy works. So I was invited to this conference, and I gave the a 10-minute version of what I'm going to talk to you for about 15 minutes about today. And Michael Rowlands didn't, and it was in favor of just a little more rigor, and Michael Rowlands didn't reply to me. He spoke first, I spoke second, a couple of other people. There were 1,000, maybe 700 to 1,002, say 702 people in the room. 700 talking therapists, right? And Michael Rowlands, who's a chemist, and me. So that's who was in the room. And though Rowlands didn't reply to anything specifically I said, the very first question, somebody sitting in the second row asked some question that was slightly critical of randomized controlled trials, and Rowlands didn't really address his question. But about halfway through, he just was getting angrier and angrier, and he started shaking his finger at this man, and he said, "And you know that in 900 years, philosophers have never contributed a single thing to science." So I took it that, being the only philosopher in the room, it was me that Michael Rowlands was mad at. So here's why they're mad at me. Because of this obvious question, what makes the effective, the outcome of a successful randomized controlled trial, what makes the outcome, for instance, putting it very briefly, T has a positive effect size for the outcome in an ideal randomized controlled trial. I call that here in the trial, or there, sorry, there in the trial. What makes that claim evidence that the treatment will play a positive causal role for that same outcome? So that's the obvious question that I think one wants to answer, and I've spent about 5 years fiddling around with the kind of complicated, on and off, complicated things to say about it, and I kind of honed it down to, there's just very, very simple thing I want to say in reply. So the question is, what connects E with H? And this is where I was interested in bringing a little rigor to the issue. And, well, it's actually mistaken to say a little rigor, because I really wanted to bring a lot of rigor, but not very complex. So essentially, what I lay out are some simple syllogisms, but apparently Ian Chalmers doesn't like syllogisms. So what connects E with H? Okay. And what I think connects E with H is, I want an argument that starts with E and ends with H. And I propose really a concatenation of two very simple arguments. The first is what I call the RCT argument, and this is a fairly standard argument in the literature that looks seriously at what you can immediately conclude from a successful randomized control. The argument uses the premise the effect size of T for O is positive to conclude that T principles governing O in the study. I'm already sloughing over issues of statistical inference here. And also how we know whether the trial is ideal. We never know that a trial is ideal, and I'm not going to really go through the details of how to define an ideal trial. You'll see some requirements that we rely on for the RCT argument. They're fairly standard requirements. But when I say I'm sloughing over issues of statistical inference, effect size, I'm going to describe to you, is defined in terms of averages. And what it's really defined in terms of are the true averages, which of course have to be inferred from the finite frequencies one sees in the experiment. So there's already a previous argument that gets you from what you see the actual numbers you see in the experiment, some kind of a statistical inference that gets you to an estimate of the true averages. But so I've already missed, I mean, that argument I'm not even going to discuss. So we start with the RCT argument that takes it that we actually have learned what an effect size is in a study, and then derives from that that the treatment plays a positive causal role under the premises, under the principles governing the outcome in the study. And then couple that with another simple argument that uses the conclusion of the first, right, to argue that, well, if T plays a positive causal role under the principles governing O in the study, it will play a positive causal role here. That's what we need, right? If you want to get from E to H, you need an argument that will take you all the way. And there are two simple arguments you can concatenate to get there. And the second one is particularly interesting because it's not just an argument that will get you there, but if the premises in this argument fail, it's just an accident that the randomized control results are relevant to your case. So it's not that gets you, in a sense, the premises are, they're not just sufficient for the bottom line, they're in some sense necessary. So here is what, you know, in a randomized control trial, you start with a study population. We're not going to discuss how the study population is chosen. That's already often a problem. But we start with a study population and randomly assign subjects in the study to either the treatment or the control group. This is the very simplest outline. And then you look to see, you introduce the treatment. There's random assignment. There's quadruple blinding. The whole point of all of this is to ensure that all the other causally relevant factors for the principles that operate there are evenly distributed in the treatment group and in the control group. And you look to see what the average value for the outcome is in the treatment group and what the average value for the outcome is in the control group. And the effect size, one definition of the effect size is it's the difference between the average and the two groups. So we do the experiment, we do it as well as we can, and we come out with a positive effect size. Okay, so what? What can you conclude from that? Well, if you suppose, for simplicity, that the causal principles are linear, you don't have to do this, you can get much the same, make the same philosophical points if they're, let's just assume for simplicity that they are linear, so that the outcome, CP stands for causal principle, the outcome is that C equal there. Sorry folks, it's at the bottom of the page, I don't know how to get it up higher. Let's see if, it's still at the bottom of the page, isn't it? Well look, all this says, what we have here is that the outcome depends on, in a unit in the study, depends on, for that unit, plus some contribution due to the treatment, plus some other stuff. So it's some simple linear expression of what kinds of things are causing the outcome. The C equals is a way of signifying that we not only have an equality between the right-hand sides and the left-hand sides, but the right-hand side factors are the causes of the left-hand side factor. So this is the causal principle that governs the production of the outcome in the study. So let's assume that it's a simple linear form like that for simplicity. And then you just do some simple calculations. These are done regularly when people explain what you can learn from an RCT. You see these are often done by Holland and Rubin or by some of the economists who work in the area. So the effect size is just the difference in the average, and just run through that simple algebra. And then one of the assumptions we want to make about the ideal RCT, part of the definition of an ideal RCT, is that the random assignment of units to either the treatment, which is here getting the treatment gives you value X, or the control X prime, the random assignment will ensure that